Hello, everybody. It is your team from the Florida Center with the FASD Collective, Shifts That Work, where we talk about survival, success, and everything in between. Our topic today is probably one of my favorites, but I may say that every time. I'm really excited though, because we are talking about how, as caregivers, we are the agents of change in the things that are supporting our kiddos, right? We can't change their brains, but we are the ones that are helping to make things look different in whatever capacity that may be. And my favorite way to think about this is the image of the crew at Friends as they are taking the couch up the stairs, and you hear pivot, pivot, right? That's really just become something that I have completely embraced within our FASD journey. I love it. It brings humor, and which I often need a little bit of humor because if I don't laugh, I might cry. But this is just such a great little topic. And so I am going to ask Rosemary to really kick us off when we start talking about how agents of change as caregivers and we do things differently. So Rosemary, take it away.
Thank you, Jen. My children are soon to be 27 and 23, so I've been through all the many ages and stages of children with this diagnosis and at at opposite ends of the spectrum, like literally. So I think that the biggest pivot that has to happen is within us, the caregivers. We cannot cure this diagnosis. There's nothing we can do to fix the damage that has been done to their brains. So we really have to throw out the old fashioned parenting handbook and really bring in a non existent but in the works parenting handbook for FASD families. So I wanted to impart some information that I have learned over time. And as you often hear about confabulation and dysmaturity, for me, understanding confabulation, that even though it feels like a lie, smells like a lie, sounds like a lie, it is often not a lie. It is our children's brain literally failing them with the information they're being asked of, and they just fill in with whatever pops in their brain. It was the hardest for me to understand that with particularly my son. But once my brain finally was able to understand and not take it so personally, and or not at all, because I recognized that I wasn't going to get the answers, so why ask anyway? Those W, who, what, when, where, why questions often don't work with our kids because they're just going to tell us either what they think we want them to say or literally what pops into their brain. And even when you're doing compliance with them, which means you ask them to do one thing, such as pick up the laundry off your floor and put it in the basket, you'll ask them to repeat it to you, and by the time they walk into their bedroom, they're found 15 minutes later on the bed playing with a matchbook or on their computers because they completely forgot what you asked them to do. And it feels like willful defiance of not complying, and often is they literally just forgot in the walk. And recognizing that I shouldn't be mad, and I need to just remind them or stand there till they get started and make sure. Because even repeating the compliance doesn't mean they're actually understanding what you've asked them to do. And really bringing it down to that very basic level of one step. And yes, it gets exhausting, but you'll get better results if you actually drill it down to the very basics and start from there. As they learn, for example, with my daughter who's got the full syndrome, cleaning your room was never a thing I could say, go clean your room. My goodness, nothing got done because that was so broad. She really needed it like pick up your laundry and put it in the basket and let me know when you're done. And then go in there and give her the next. It literally took 8 years for her to get the whole process of cleaning her room. But happily, after 8 years of doing this, I can say, go clean your room, and she knows all the steps. But it was a long, drawn out process. But as an adult now, she really does know. And I'm happy to say, because she lives in a group situation with developmental disability services, that the most impressed thing they were when she moved there was the owners of the house were like, she actually knows how to clean really well. And for having an intellectual disability, I was like, yes, it took 8 years to teach her that, but I was proud to hear that she did learn it and she can demonstrate those skills. So even though the process might have been like a billion years longer, it's still, you get there eventually. And I can say with my son, the mental maturity that has happened between 25 and he'll be 27 in a couple of weeks is like 100 million times better. Like all of a sudden he has empathy and things that just never seemed to be there. And, he signs off on a phone call with "bye mom, I love you." And there was many years where I didn't hear that. So those changes are really gonna happen. It's just about how to get there. So the changes have to be with us. They can't cure themselves. And how I describe this is like you think about a child that's maybe 4 and they're diagnosed with devastating type 1 diabetes. That becomes a whole family diagnosis. Everybody needs to learn how to count carbs and check food labels and know how to do the gizmos. I don't, for lack of a better thing, the Dexcom and all the things that they wear. If anybody else in the family ever wants to have that child at their house without mom and dad, they have to understand it just as well. So it becomes a family diagnosis. It becomes all the best friends and their parents' diagnosis. Well, I see FASD as the same thing, is if everybody starts to recognize and learn that our kids are 99% of the time not being willfully awful, that this is their brain and how their disorder appears is with behavior. So it feels so awful when it's behavior, particularly when it's really difficult behavior. But when you start to get that they're really not in control of it and that a meltdown really is like way past a tantrum, it really makes a huge difference. And in addition to what we need to change, there are other ways of dealing with other adults in our lives. And I think Crystal has a really good part of this part of the conversation. So take it away, Crystal.
So yeah, a lot of times, we hear about, caregivers are asking for like recommendations on FASD informed professionals because it's so difficult to find, to walk into an appointment looking for help and walk out of it and not have anything that we can use today, right now, in this moment when we get home. And so, kind of one of those pivots that we have to make is that we have to realize that we have to take our place as the expert in the room. We can't expect that we're going to go to the doctor's office with a therapist um, and get the answers that we need because, frankly, there's just not a lot of information out there. It's getting a lot better. It's way better than it was. But really, we can attribute that to a lot of the work that FASD advocates are doing. And so just realizing that, take your place as the expert in the room, make that pivot that we're not going to walk in there and expect to get all of the answers. But we can bring answers in there and we can help, make other people aware of the can't versus won't, that our children are not liars, that they're confabulating and that their brains are trying to fill in the blanks for things that are missing from their actual memory. We can be we can do that in very respectful and kind ways, but with a backbone too, be firm about it, and just be willing to take up that spot in your child's life as the expert.
To piggyback on that, I think particularly when it comes to therapists or physicians, if they're willing to hear you and willing to get out the books and start learning themselves, they're worth maybe giving them a couple of chances. But if you have a person that doesn't even believe this is a disability, it's time to move on, get a new primary care, because all they're going to do is cause, and again, I'm not saying they're doing it on purpose, but they're not understanding what your life is like. And therefore, they're going to make judgments that are just going to make things worse. So you really need to learn when it's time to cut your losses and move and try a different person. And that also can be geographically difficult if there isn't a whole lot of therapists in a more rural area of Florida or wherever in the country. But you really have to try, or at least try to convince them to be open-minded. Even when my son was in wraparound services through post-adoption, we they didn't know much about this, but I had, by the grace of whatever, got a team who was willing to go learn. And then they found programs that I didn't know about. And I was pretty informed at that point. And I was so pleased. And I know that future children that were assigned to them were in good hands, because so many kids fall through the cracks. And this is likely to be what the problem is driving all the other things. And it's just not diagnosed, because, the reason many children end up in care outside of their home is due to strong addiction problems, and which often means the child was prenatally exposed. So we're not going to fix everybody. And, I would love, having worked for a big university with a teaching medical school, is to compel them to add not just one lecture, but like a whole curriculum, like what the autism community gets and how much everybody learns about that. We need that change to happen, but it isn't going to happen overnight. So the change must be with us. And it really is going right back to the basics and moving up to um, changing your mindset first, because they're hard. This is a very hard parenting job to do. And you want to be able to get to the side where I now get the great feedback from my son, and see glimmers with my daughter. She's 23, so she's not even at the 25 mark yet, because that seems to be the magic number. But anyway, Jen, I'd like to hear, you had a really good point to bring up also.
Well, I'm very much anticipating that 25-year-old mark, even for my neurotypical kiddo. Um, but I want to like go back to embracing the thought process around us and pivoting as caregivers, and kind of like when I had my first aha moment with my kiddo, and he struggled a lot with behavioral symptoms. He's got an average IQ, so right, he sounds and looks and talks and does all the things where he appears to be very neurotypical. But for him, his emotional regulation was one of our first red flags for FASD, even when he was really young. And I was gifted the mantra of if he could, he would. And a lot of times, I know that he doesn't like coming down from those big emotional moments. And even still, many years later, when he has a hard time, I'm able to view him as having a hard time instead of giving me a hard time, because it's so easy to take all of these big struggles personally and to be like, kind of going back to what Rosemary said, like, we just did this yesterday. I know that you know how to do X, Y, or Z. Um, but it really was just this great place of me being able to say, like, if he could, he would. So, that's when I started learning about co-regulation, and on purpose, just really helping him with being able to regulate instead of asking him to regulate on his own or using timeout. The 3-minute timeout that turned into a 45-minute timeout because he couldn't do the 3-minute timeout successfully. Well, if you mess up, we're going to add another minute to it. But it was just, it really was my opportunity to have the taking the step back and realizing that, man, he is not doing these things on purpose. So I'm the one that's going to have to start understanding and doing things differently. Um, and that was just such a great opportunity for us to use the if he could, he would mantra, even in different scenarios, right? If he could go to school and be successful today, he would. If he could pass this test, if he could remember this vocabulary word, if he could, whatever it was. And it really helped me also move forward with him in a place of relationship and attachment, instead of being frustrated with him because he just wouldn't be good for other people or whatever the case was. So like, I really love thinking about us as caregivers being the agents of change, and we're the ones that are leading the way to help others, whether it's the professionals that we're working with, the schools that we're working with, the family, the village, whoever it is we have supporting our kids, whoever is part of their loving community. It's a great way to really start thinking differently. And I love that that's one of the things that we do with our FASD kiddos.
Yeah, I'd like to add that since it is a family diagnosis, just like any other, big thing, that training for all of your village people, your best friend, the grandparents, your sister, brother, taking basic trainings or at least reading some of the literature will make a difference in them starting. But I can say that it's best if you can get them to take a class, because when the message isn't coming from you, who looks like you're the excuse maker for your child's bad behavior, or I don't even want to say bad, but less than desirable behavior, it's the message isn't heard as well. But when they're hearing it from experts and professionals, even though we all do the trainings, we wouldn't want to be the one always training our own people, giving them help, but sending them to the experts to learn, because it's unbiased and they'll hear the message so much better. And then you'll hopefully see better relationships with them and understanding of why your child is doing what they're doing. And you're not just making excuses for them. Crystal, real quick, could you talk about the school aspect of it? And how being in an IEP and being that change person or the expert in the room again, because that's another area that needs to be also thought of.
Sure. So like, when you're in these meetings, just being able to share with them, characteristics of FASD and, how they are showing up at school, that, our students aren't sitting in class trying to be belligerent or just zoning out, not paying attention. That they have actual, an actual diagnosis, an actual brain injury that is causing these symptoms that they're seeing, and that, we need to be able to accommodate them. It's not, a way of helping our kids to get away with something or trying to make things easier for them as opposed to other students. It's really not about that. It's about helping them to make up for the deficits that they might, be having, and help them to be able to
Advocate. You're advocating for your child, and you are the best advocate no matter what,
right.
because we are the experts in FASD when we're sitting in those meetings, and we know our children best. So when we all help with the advocacy part of it and make sure that the team really understands our children as much as we can get that, well, it will make a huge difference and hopefully prevent a lot of the nuclear meltdowns, because it's often caused by the very adults who we don't want our teachers to be harmed or have to deal with this, but a lot of times they are unknowingly or unwittingly causing the behaviors to happen because they're not recognizing the brain-based disability that it is. So I think
Exactly.
that's a really hard uh, point for them, but it's someplace where we can really work. All these changes are not going to happen, and you're not going to be expected to turn on the switch and have all the expertise of how to do it. It's baby steps. And as you learn how to do things, as Maya Angelou says, when you know better, you do better. And that's so appropriate to our community, that we think of it as we learn it and we start implementing it, and then we work on the next thing. And little by little, our children will thrive. It might look different, but they will eventually. The goal is to keep them safe from their own selves and others, and have them become productive adults as best as they can be. And if that means interdependence instead of independence, we look at all those things. But anyway, Jen, will you wrap it up, please?
Yes, I'm going to wrap us up with a selfless promo that if anybody ever is interested in training opportunities, if you'd like to share a training, here at the Florida Center, we typically have a introduction to FASD either available by recording or a live opportunity coming up on our schedule. So please reach out to us. Just letting you know that that is a resource and be helping other people become agents of change. So thanks so much for showing up with us today, guys. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.